Hello, my name is Olivia Lynch, and this is the story of my uncle who lost his battle with addiction. My dad has three brothers, my uncle Peter, Christopher, and Michael. Ever since a young age, I wouldn't see Michael too often. He would occasionally make it to a birthday party or our annual Christmas Eve party with the entire side of my dad's family. I was too young to think anything of his absence since I didn't get to see a lot of any of my uncles. Once I got to an age where I started being curious and asking questions about my family and learning who caused the drama at the family events and who to not discuss my life plans with, I was slowly discovering the truth about my uncle. He was an addict. It started with alcohol, then moved to gateway drugs, and leaped to heroin and opioids. He was in and out of homeless shelters, living on the streets, couch surfing, and staying with my grandma, all connecting the dots to why he was never around too much. My mom is the CEO of a local drug and alcohol recovery center, and through eavesdropping on her and my dad's conversations at a young age, I found out my uncle was in and out of treatment there. The harsh reality of addiction these days is that it is an uncomfortable topic. My parents didn't want to sit me down and tell me my uncle was using hard drugs, or that he couldn't make it to my 5th birthday party again because he was too high. So instead, it was just the unspoken knowledge that he was addicted to drugs, and that was that. I believe this was all due to not knowing how I would handle it. They didn't want me to ask questions that could lead to potentially promising me his presence at the next birthday party, which was a promise they certainly couldn't keep. The unpredictability of someone with a substance use disorder is discussed in the source, Understanding Stigma of Mental and Substance Use Disorders. This article dives deep into each factor influencing why people turn to drugs that ultimately leads to addiction, and then the outcome of this negative stigma. My grandma's favorite holiday was Valentine's Day. An odd one to pick as a favorite, I know, but it was just an excuse to have a little pink party for all the uncles, aunts, and cousins, where she would give us little goodie bags and get us all sugar high. Michael, my uncle, was never around for these parties, except for one year he finally returned. He walked in with a sponsor, finally what we were all waiting for. His name was Norman. He was this big Samoan man, one of the nicest men I've ever met. We welcomed Norman into the family as we re-welcomed Michael home. Michael and his sponsor came to every event. Christmas Eve, birthdays, Thanksgiving, our classic Valentine's Day parties, all was well again. The disinformation and uneducation of a recovering addict caused some confusion in the family. Michael would step out of the room when people would start consuming alcohol or offering him something to drink, causing the family to think he was doing something quote-unquote bad, when in reality, he knew that being around alcohol would be too hard for him, so he would remove himself from the situation. Or he felt the events of being around so many loved ones that he could possibly have been hurting was stressful, and he needed a couple of moments to reflect. Disinformation would also cause discomfort in my own life, because when I would open up and share about my uncle to my friends, I could feel the mood of the room switch, because the stigma around people with substance use disorders is that they are dangerous and destructive, when in reality my uncle was the funniest man I knew and learned to make jokes about his brain injuries from his disorder. Previously, I said people with substance use disorders instead of an addict or a substance use disorder, because the language that we use to discuss people with this disorder is crucial. In the source, Monitor of Psychology, they examine the words we use and the connotations behind them. Abuser and addict have a very malicious and negative attitude to them. So with the words we choose, it can either add to the stigma or it could potentially tear it down in a positive way with each conversation about addiction that we have. The hardest part of my uncle's addiction for me was seeing the toll it took on my family. My mom felt responsible because he was off and on going through her recovery at her facility, so when it wouldn't work, it crushed her. My dad felt responsible because he was his brother and he wished he was able to help more than he could. My grandma felt responsible because it was her son who was going through all of this. But the matter of the fact is, it was probably draining on them, constantly worrying about him, giving him resources only for him to betray them again. Trying to help him when he didn't realize he needed help. The reasons he wasn't getting the help he needed is because of denial, shame, and fear. I found this information through a source, The 3 Biggest Reasons That People Don't Seek Help for Addiction, from Virtava Health. This is a source that sheds light onto the overarching reasons individuals can't mentally let themselves get the help they need. I think deep down all of those reasons are rooted back to the stigma society presents around addiction, which is addressed in the source, Stigma, Social Inequality, and Alcohol and Drug Use, by Robin Room. Now back to the story. Michael was clean, staying in touch with his sponsor, living with my grandma, but then my grandma passed away. We are still not sure if this is what caused his relapse, but it is necessarily the only lead we have. He was back on the streets and blew through the money he got from my grandma's will, all on drugs. In the fall of last year, sitting in my dorm room, I got a call from my dad, saying my uncle Michael had passed away. He was using again, and this time his body couldn't take it. Obviously, my family was sad, but we know he's in a better place now. There is no suffering in fighting his addiction anymore, no more hurting his loved ones, no more worrying from my family. I wish I could say that my uncle beat his addiction problem, but unfortunately, his addiction beat him. I think as I have grown older, addiction will always be a rather sensitive topic for me. But in all honesty, I wish that was not the case. I wish the stigma around addiction and recovery isn't the way it is. I wish people could recognize that addiction isn't a choice at all. My uncle tried his best to receive the help and stick with it. I think if the world didn't penalize people with addiction problems and think of them as lesser, then people would be more open to getting the help they need and deserve. This matter is expressed in an article written by Carla Reed, published in the website Health Affairs. I think maybe if my family supported him more, there could have been a different outcome. Overall, since reflecting back onto the story, I have taken away that you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped, but you always have to try. Thank you so much for listening.